Out of my curiosity, I asked a few questions from Mr. Terev, and he was very kind and gentle to respond to me and give me 10 tips in total. So, my first question was actually, Mr. Terev, how do you manage time for the review process? And let us see what he responded. He said, I accept all the review invitations that come to me, and I have all the time to do it. Even when I don't have the time to do it, still I review. When I was not an author, even still, I reviewed manuscripts. Well, he was so kind and gentle to tell me all his experience about. So, out of curiosity, I asked him, what are these effects of whatever these review process you are doing? He said, all this management of time leads to an overstretching of time at the cost of reciprocity to all the journals. And even though when I'm not experienced or not with sufficient expertise, I'm reviewing it. But see, Richa, it doesn't matter. After all, you can accept a review invitation even when you should not be doing so. So that should be your tip number one. Well taken, Mr. Terev. I moved on. I was again overwhelmed by his answers and I had more curiosity, more questions, as you must be having too. So, my second question to Mr. Terev was, what is the actual time in which you submit peer review? Because we usually get reminders for that. Well, he said, I never submit in time. I don't have the time to do so. I forget the deadlines of review. We also do. Sometimes I don't submit at all. I also get late reviews, so I reciprocate the same way. It's just give and take. Well, what are the effects then? Well, he said, the authors suffer. They suffer a lot. The process gets delayed. The editor gets overburdened and they start searching for new reviewers. And then some of my colleagues, they come for rescue and do my job. And that is how the review process goes on. So, my second tip, my dear, is never submit your review in time. It's not a problem. Well, I moved on again because he had committed me at least 10 questions. So, how do you manage those regular reminders coming from journal managers, editorial board, etc., for submitting the peer review? Well, he had some excellent answers for me. He said, I don't complete reviews in time. The reason is I like being personally approached by the editors. At least they know my name by this. Otherwise, I'm just getting those mock messages, the automated calls that please submit timely reviews. Well taken, sir. So, what is the effect of this? So, he gets keep on getting the reminders for completing or unclear content of reviews and delay the whole process. Not a big deal, can be done easily. So, I give you the tip number three, keep ignoring messages from the general manager, keep calm. Well, he was so intelligent and so kind enough to answer me that my questions still moved on. I said, Mr. Terev, what about pointing the possibility of plagiarism in peer review? How do you take that? Well, he had some good answers for that. He said, I don't put efforts to point out any plagiarized content in the manuscript I'm reviewing because that is not my job. I'm here to just review the manuscript. But I sometimes do that when I don't have least of the time for reviewing because it saves my time. I just have to write one line, the manuscript is plagiarized and the review is completed. So I have to make a choice when I have the time and when I don't have the time. The effect you see is it may be a slight breach of publication ethics. It may be a slight waste of the review process, but then we are doing the good job. So take my tip four. There's no mandate for adhering to publication ethics while reviewing. There's no absolutely no mandate for that. Well absorbed. As I was an amateur in peer review process, I continued, the conversation with Mr. Terev. Then I was so curious. I asked, with all these tips and all, how do you actually write the peer review? You must be writing something. So what is that? He said, I often write general and vague lines while reviewing. I don't write some descriptive peer reviews for my reviewers. It's not going to help them either. I save a lot of time by this, both mine and my authors and my editors. Oh, yes. But the effect, Mr. Tariff? Oh, the review becomes useless for authors when I write so. And the editors get overburdened again and can invite more reviewers, and it's their job to do so. It can also damage my academic reputation, but it's okay. I'm saving a lot of time. So my tip five, my dear, always write a vague review that is not much useful for the author. Save your time, it's precious. Halfway through the conversation, I had much of knowledge. Well, the knowledge is never enough. But still, Mr. Teref, there is all lot of blah blah about the structure of peer review, the huge amount of, regulations, rules, formats. How do you follow that? Now he had a long answer this time. He said, Richa, I'm not much concerned for what are called the key sections of the manuscript. Now these are like scope of the journal, novelty of the research, the title as related to the article contents, the clarity of the abstract, the knowledge gap addressed or not, objectives are articulated or not, applied research methodology, reliability of the results, whether the objectives are achieved or not, limitations are listed or not, or the results are justified or not. At least he knew all of them. Well, I don't write all these in the review process. And what is the effect, Mr. Terev? Well, I give no recommendation for improving the manuscript because I have to respect the author's enthusiasm as well. After all, the authors have put in so much of time and effort in creating that manuscript. So take my tip number 6. You can forget the key components of article to be reviewed, and it's absolutely normal. I moved on. Still, I had some curiosity, Mr. Terra, when I asked him, what about the clarity and fairness of the peer review? Everybody is talking about ethics of peer review, and we must be following it. Well, he said, I don't clarify my comments. There is no need of clarification. The authors can understand every bit of it on their own. I tell the authors what is not good, but I cannot tell them how to improve because I don't know what is there to improve on. I can be harsh at words sometimes if I don't like their work. See, it's very difficult to appreciate all the authors, and I cannot be modest all the time. Yes, Mr. Tariff, I agreed with him. And what are the consequences of these acts? He said, authors are never grateful for such reviews because it's not a contribution to the academics or the subject content. But again, it does not matter. It is normal to provide unclear, unfair, and biased statements in peer review. And you again save a lot of time. So that was James Bond tip number 007. I had still the opportunity of 3 more questions from Mr. Terrell. So my curiosity waned again, and I asked, then what happens when you have manuscripts for peer review with some common interest? For example, I get manuscripts related to dental caries, and that's an area I'm working on. So what do you do in that context? Well, he said, I may use the knowledge of authors and share the content in case I have a similar work at hand. I also need help from literature. These authors are really helping me. And also, he winked at me and said, I can just delay the process also if I feel I'm reviewing the work that is similar to mine. Then what are the effects? Well, I get some personal advancements in my professional career, and that is my advantage. There may be a slight breach in confidentiality. Well, that's a side effect. So, breaching of confidentiality is not punishable. So, you may go ahead with it. Take the tip of the day. I asked him again. I've heard that reviewers ask for academic favors during peer review. Is it right? And do you do the same, Mr. Terev? How do you approach this context? He said, I often ask authors for citation of my articles or my colleagues' articles. You see, we help each other and help us and let us grow. We have to help each other in our academic excellence like this. Ultimately, my H index should also improve. Why should I be left behind? I agreed on. So, what are the effects, Mr. Teref? He said some biased statements may be there in reviewed research when you ask for citations or references, and a slight violation of publication ethics. But then I tell you, Richa, violation of publication ethics for self-interest is quite common, and you can go ahead with it. With this, I was approaching the last question of my interview with Mr. Teref. So I asked him, with all that knowledge that you've given me, okay, I know how I can write a peer review now, but any final structuring or reviewing of the written peer review, are you doing it? He said, absolutely not. Once written, it's done. There's no need to review your own review. There's no need to remove harsh statements, and there's no need of any compliments to the authors. It's not needed. Once you're done with it, don't review it. And what are the effects, sir? Well, you regret later, so there's no point revisiting it. It can damage your academic reputation, but then it's okay, saving a lot of time. It can destroy the sanctity of the whole process, but again, you are making some professional advantage of it for yourself. The take-home tip of the day: there's no need to review your review of others' work. So keep calm and keep on reviewing. Well, he also gave me some examples where he had written some very nice or terrible reviews. As you can see, he talked about sheep, he talked about cats, and he also had recommended a few papers where he had very simple, very modestly written, great paper, recommend acceptance. He even advised the authors to play Sudoku. So he had several examples to give me how to write a very terrible review. Well, I was overwhelmed with the knowledge he gave me. Now, Mr. Tariff's story is not unique. We all can relate to this in some way or the other. Now, the pun and the sarcasm apart, the intent of this publication is not to humiliate our reviewers. We respect each other, we respect you all. The only intent was to help us to reflect on ourselves and to enable us to prevent from becoming in what is called an adversary reviewer. So each one of us don't want us to become an adversary reviewer. Rather, we should lend our hand in helping our professional colleagues in joining in pulling up that publication, because we are not alone in experiencing the pressure to publish. There are many authors who find themselves in this situation, and when they submit their papers, they hope their articles are being received fast, fair, and they get constructive peer reviews. You see, the bottom line of this is that without peer reviews, the publication system can never exist. So you should all lend a hand to your professional colleagues and help them in the publication process. Thank you all for the patient listening.
Indeed, a very nice presentation style. I'm sure you are a periodontist, a very good one. You know how to handle. Last 4 days, everybody had been babbling, do this, do this, do this. In your telling not to do this, you have projected our message much clearly. So this negative uh, feedback or negative thing has, I think, would have stimulated all of us much more than the positive reinforcement we were doing for last 4 days. Thank you so much, Dr. Richa. Any questions? There have been no questions till now. They have so much enjoyed your presentation. Actually, they forgot to write anything.
Enjoyed this story.
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, anything that the reviewer does which you would like to point out as an editor?
I will come with my presentation and I'll explain what an editor wants, how the editor wants the review to be there. So I think if there are no other questions, we can move ahead and discuss the article assigned.
Yes, ma'am. There are no questions. So for the time being, let's move on to our next part, the assignment.
Yeah. Before actually going to the assignment, I would like to share the checklist so that we can, although Dr. Sandeep Kumar yesterday did share the checklist or the how to write the review, but I think I can start from where he left yesterday, and then so we have got the checklist for our journal, and I would like to go ahead with this. So the first thing, as Richa said, we should know what is the best way of writing your comments and what is the worst way of writing your comments. How can you be highlighted as a good reviewer and how can you be highlighted as a terrible reviewer? So it's all up to you whether you want to be in the good books or you want to be blacklisted from the reviewer system. So to share with you how we suggest that the start of your review should be with a short paragraph. So in a small paragraph, you can have a summary of the article assigned to you for review. So this is about this was the study design. So something in general, what you can think of that the whole article is all about and why you find it interesting. So you have to talk about the summary of the article, then you have to talk about the strengths of the article. And also you need to talk about the limitations or the weaknesses of the article. So this is the general impression of the article which you have presented to the editor. So now this will give now the editor does not need to go through the entire article. Just with your 3 short para, the editor comes to know about the good and the bad of the article. So your review should suggest whether you liked it, your interest in it, whether you wanted to go through the entire article or you were just pissed off with the start even and you didn't like commenting also. So it was whether it maintained your enthusiasm in going through it or whether you disliked the entire article. So you have to tell and write that whether it was novel, whether it was interesting, the impact it made upon you, and whether it's going to add anything to the scientific literature. So that is important because as we have been talking about, if more and more duplicate articles are coming on the same area or with the same content, then there is no point the author will like to read, any other reader would like to go through your article. So if you're filling in a gap in knowledge, then the readability of the article is enhanced. So you have to see that. Otherwise, duplication of scientific literature doesn't make any sense. So whenever you're writing your review comments, don't write long sentences. It should be very short, clear message, clearly defined paragraphs. And if now when you're going through the entire article content, then you can even go point wise. So in the title changes suggested or in the methodology changes suggested. So this way you can cover the entire article. So but the first paragraph should be the summary of the article, then the strengths of the article, and then the weakness of the article. Then you can see whether the figures attached are of good quality or not, whether you want some particular area also to be visualized. So you want to see the surgical procedure or you want to see what happened post-operatively. So any other figure you want that would enhance the readability or solve the query of the reader should be asked and should be suggested. Now give your specific comments topic by topic in the as in the checklist. Keep comments strictly factual. So you have to be very sure that you are writing, this is what you're reviewing is scientific content. You're not reviewing any literature. So whatever factual, you have to talk about that. Then you also need to suggest feedback on the data presentation. So is this the best way of presenting your data, or you can suggest the author. The main purpose of the reviewer is to enhance the readability. So if it can improve upon the data presented, the reviewer must be suggesting that to the author. Raise your suspicions with the editor if you suspect that you have read something like this or something which you believe can't happen and it is presented as the scientific content in the article. Just in your blank area where you have to write to the editor, mention that this something fishy over here and you need to cross check maybe with other reviewers. So this is how you should be starting. And if you feel that you are also a part of the bias, so just discuss it with the editor. Maybe there is some possibility of bias. Now topic by topic. So first is the title. Usually the reviewers don't get the first title page which has the title, the author list, the affiliations, and if the prior presentation of data has been there in any conference or any symposium, and who is the corresponding author. So this list is usually not provided to the reviewers. But the title is there. So the reviewer has to see whatever the content of the article is, the title is apt for that or not. If they want to suggest any changes, any shortening of the title or any word to be added to the title, the reviewer may suggest that. Reviewer may also guide the authors to revise the title as required, and the reviewer must be aware of the guide to authors. So whatever it's in the guide to authors, how many words can be in the title, what should be a short title, what should be the long title. So accordingly, he has to see that this article fits into the guide to authors suggestions. Then the general impression and the abstract, because abstract is whatever is freely available. So if the abstract covers the summary of the original article, and after reading the abstract, the reader would want to go through or may not want to go through the article. So the abstract should be very clear, very concise, and should display just like a trailer of a movie. So it should show you that this is going to be presented in a better way, in a descriptive way in the entire article. So you, in the abstract, you have to check whether it's the real summary of the paper. All four objectives, methods, results, and conclusions should be included. It should not be just a paragraph saying just a summary. So it has to have structure with all four headings. Does it include the key results? The key results should be in the result section of the abstract. All necessary information only should be there. No unwanted, because the abstract again has got a word limit. So in that word limit, you have to say whatever important is in the article. And the abstract should not be long. Now coming to the introduction. Many a times, the articles have got a very long introduction. Introduction should be short, crisp, and should widen from a wide base. It should focus onto the research question. So it should be an hourglass image later on. So wide introduction, narrowing to the focused research question, then the methodology, and the discussion again has to be wide. So introduction should be effective, clear, and well organized. It should summarize the current state of the topic, what is the knowledge gap, what is the scope of the problem, and the purpose of the study. So what are the aims and objectives of this study should be the last line of the introduction. And what has been the flaw in the prior research? If somebody else has done it, how differently it was, and how do you suppose that your result or your study is going to improve that knowledge which has been obtained from prior research or because of the flaws in the prior research. So introduction should also define the aim, the research question, and the hypothesis. How this study will fill knowledge gap and overcome the results, and does it lay out the primary aim, objectives, and steps of the study? Is the research question appropriate and need of the hour? So you should not be doing any study which was done years earlier and is have no use now. With the obsolete procedures should not be undertaken. So that has to be checked. Does it really introduce and put into perspective what follows? Suggest changes in the organization and point authors to appropriate citations if necessary. So even if you want to put citations in the abstract, you should be doing that. And when you are making your comments, that specific area should be mentioned so that the author comes to know that where he has to improve. In the methodology section, it is important that you can create the repeatability. So if any other person wants to repeat the same experiment, so entire procedure has to be outlined. The study design, the inclusion exclusion criteria, the sample size. So these are the things you should through. If you keep this checklist with you, you can just see that yes, this is there. You can just tick whatever is there, and whatever is not there, then you can highlight it in your report. So if it's a case control study, are the matched controls? As you review any research project, similarly, you have to review the article as well. So I'll be sharing this with you. And this is how you can see what type of study has been undertaken, and you can say, yes, this is the best way to solve that research question, or the study is no use because this study design is not going to answer such type of research question. Then this also Dr. Sandeep Kumar also yesterday he discussed, but I wanted to highlight that COPE is on the publication ethics and PERC is the resource kit, publication ethics resource kit. So whenever you are planning any publication, these two have to be taken care of. For clinical trials, consort guidelines. For epidemiological studies, STROBE. So as per the article which was assigned to you all, it mentions about the STROBE guidelines. And the PRISMA guidelines are for systematic review and meta-analysis. For meta-analysis of observational studies, it is the MOOS. For case reports, it's CARE, and for animal studies, it is ARRIVE. For biological specimens, it is BRISC. For prognostic markers, it's REMARK. For diagnostic accuracy reporting, it is STARD. For multivariable prediction model of individual prognosis or diagnosis reporting, it is TRIPOD. Most of these we don't require. Whenever we are writing, we are usually requiring the initial ones. But this is an entire list of the guidelines which may be required as and when your article for your article type. And this must be mentioned what guidelines have been followed. Coming to the results, write concisely and precisely what changes you recommend. If you want the table to be presented differently, you have to suggest that. Are the results presented clearly, accurately? Is the same order as aims? So aim 1, 2, 3 has to be described similarly in the result section. You cannot say aim 1 first and aim 3 second and then later on coming to the other aim. So it has to be follow a same pattern. Have all the relevant data been included? Is there any risk of patient or participants being identified? So patient should not be identified. Is the data described in the text consistent with the data in the figures and tables? So it is requested that if any data has been covered or presented in the figures, it should not be duplicated in the tables, or if it is in the tables, it should not be in the figures. And if you have presented something in figures and tables, you just need to mention it in the text. You don't need to describe it in the entire material should not be there in the result section. So very shortly, you can put it in text. Now discussion again, it has to go wide. Have authors begin here? The author should begin from the hypothesis and the primary and secondary findings. So that should be the opening statement that this was the hypothesis and this is how we got the findings. So that has been, should be, when you're writing the review, you should see that the author has presented that way only. Do the authors logically explain the findings? So each finding has to be described logically. Do the authors compare the findings with current findings? And are the implications of the finding for future research and potential applications discussed? So as when you see in the discussion, the entire discussion is about the findings and how they are comparable with the previous ones, how they have improved results, and then there should be the discussion on what were the limitations and what were the strengths of the article. So once the strengths and limitations of the article is discussed, in the discussion, the last paragraph of the discussion should be on the future research. So what from here, where to go? So that should be the last comment in the article. If any of these is missing, the reviewer should be describing that as a suggestion in the review report. If there is any contradictory data discussed, so some result is saying something, another result is saying something, so an explanation should be asked. Even if the reviewer feels that some additional tests or analysis are required, he may suggest the author that this is what is required and that is going to enhance the readability and give clarification of the procedure to the reader. Are the strengths and any limitations of the study discussed? So this we are talked. Potential bias and confounders. So if you feel that the author has not discussed the bias in his methodology and in the discussion and the confounders which may have caused the result, so then you have to suggest the author to include them in the discussions area. Then the applicability of the findings has also to be discussed in the discussion. Grammar changes, you can just suggest, but Usually the publishers have got their team and minor grammatical corrections are done during the publication process. And you also have to see whether the latest literature has been discussed here or not, because whatever may have been the research gap earlier, maybe a recent article has been published on that, and so that has to be included in the discussion section whenever you are going through that. And then finally you have to see whether you feel that the manuscript is worth being published. So would you want that to be published or not? You have to be clear in your mind. If it is if you feel that it is to be rejected, then you can just write a small paragraph and say these are the flaws of the study which doesn't make it publishable, and you don't need to spend a lot. But if you feel that this study is good but it has not been dealt with properly, you may suggest to the author that these are the corrections. If these are done this way, it will be improved, and then you have to put in lot of effort. Again, when you see the conclusion section, you have to see that whatever data was presented, many times what we see is everything where in the result something else is discussed, and whatever has not been tested comes into the conclusion. So you have to see what was tested and there was a result favorable or negative, that comes to the conclusion section. Then you have to also say whatever results they were valid, they are important. Whatever you're writing, it should be very polite. It should, as you would want yourself, you have to believe that you are the author, and as you would want any comments for you, you should behave in that way and give comments to the author. So tables and figures, you have to see how good are they. I'll share with you with this checklist, so you can go ahead with that. And the references we have discussed, that in the references also you have to see what is the guide for authors, how many references are allowed in a particular type of article. So you have to see, also check the accuracy, number, and approach. Sometimes it happens that the reference is there but the year is missing, or sometimes only 3 authors are there and et al is made, or sometimes 6 authors, or sometimes they list the entire authors. So according to the content or the guide to authors, for that particular journal, the references should be mentioned. And all these, many a times it happens that the authors have written their references but cited in the literature. So you have to make sure that all these references are actually there in the text. So I think that covers the references. And final checks, this may, I usually do it that I don't review the article in a single day. I just give a cursory glance on the first day, and I think upon it that whether it is, I feel it is interesting and I want to read it again, or it's so badly written, the study design is poor, the scientific content is poor, and there's nothing new in this, and we know much more than what is available in this article, then I don't give it a second try, and then I know that I'm going to reject it. So I don't put much effort into rereading and giving my comments on that. So whenever you're writing your review comment, it should be constructive criticism. Make sure that you are soft in your language, and rest grammar and spelling is the role of the publishing house. They can take care of that. So don'ts. So as we talked about the do's, we also should know that spelling, grammar, layout of the article, we don't need to comment. Slight suggestion may be given, but then entire effort should not be on that. If there are any alternative viewpoints or theories that might conflict with our own, so we should suggest that this is another way, and it may come into the discussion section. Share the review or information about the review. So the guidelines, they have to be mentioned, and we have to see when we were talking about the references, that the citations are not just from the self citation. We have to we don't have to promote that. and the reviewer should not also be asking reviewer's citation to be included in the author's article. As an author, when I've written, I have also received many a times comments from reviewers, including their suggestion to include either their work or their friend's work. And sometimes you feel like, as an author, if you want it to be published, you will have to go through the reviewers' suggestions. But it's your wish. If you want, if you feel it is justified in adding to your literature, then you should be including those. And if you feel that the reviewers' comments are just they are not authentic and they are just for increasing the citation for the reviewer, you can humbly and gently say that I've included similar literature from him and I think it covers those points. So there's a different way of saying, returning back to the reviewer more gently and suggesting that without those citations also your article is supporting the literature. So there are reference tools. Usually we talked about the plagiarism tool is for the editors and the reviewers don't get the tool to check. But this is initially taken care of when the articles is sent to the reviewers for review. So they don't have to be disturbed by the plagiarism. And this is the article section, different sections. And in short, what the reviewers need to go through. So this is the entire thing, and I think we can share it up with you all. Now,
Thank you so much, ma'am. There are few questions. Would you like to take them now before moving on to? Ma'am, you are muted.
yes,
There are few questions. Shall we take it now?
yes, yes.
Ma'am, the first question is how important we should consider the reporting of research hypothesis or null hypothesis in the introduction part.
Just you have to wherever you are writing your research question. So the last paragraph of the introduction should carry the aims and objectives and the research question and the hypothesis. It's up to you whether you want to write a null hypothesis or a positive hypothesis. It's up to you, but it should be there in the article. You should be suggesting that.
And then somebody has asked, is there any good free plagiarism software? That you have already answered, that reviewers don't need
Yes,
them.
reviewers don't need to do that.
Then there's another question. Should citations be put in abstract and conclusion?
Abstract, no. Conclusion, no. Conclusion is your own research which you are concluding. So if you are citing your conclusion, that means you don't have any originality. So what you are doing, referring to any other person. So conclusion should be your own, based upon your entire result. So because you're not, it is very short, 2 sentences or 3 sentences max are there in the conclusion. You are not writing a detailed conclusion. So it doesn't have the space to citing any other literature.
Then somebody has asked, is it okay to reject an article after it has been revised?
Yes, it may, because it may happen that the revision suggested had some comments and the author may not have. So sometimes some added experiments are asked by the reviewers that it would be better if you can have this experiment as well, and the author says, oh, I don't want this much time to be taken again and I've done whatever I wanted to do, and he submits back again without those added experiments. So then there are much chance that the publication is rejected. So if it is required, it is required. And Mr. Marcus, would you want to say something on this?
It's a very comprehensive, and I think it's terribly, terribly important. You said it, to be fair, all the way through to take time. I tend to do my reviews very quickly. Well, as soon as I get them, I try and do them. But there's one, in fact, I did one this morning for another esteemed journal, which I'd received about 5 days ago. And I'd left it for what I bench rest because I wasn't sure that really what they were saying was entirely valid. So that's a difficult situation. And you have to then let them know that, and the editor know that, and perhaps reject it. I don't like to reject unless it's really very bad, and there are quite a lot of very bad that get through the initial review by the editors. What else? I mean, you know, one just has to have a very fair and balanced and comprehensive approach.
Yep. What I do also is the same. When I get an article to review, I make sure that I agree the same day or latest by next day. Otherwise, I tend to forget. So if I've agreed, then I have to keep it open on my system so that I know it is some job is pending. If I close it and then I lose it. So I don't want to bring a bad name to my reviewer in the review list. So I tend to do whatever I do. As soon as I can finish it, I complete the job.
Right. I think so. And, you know, there's 3 weeks is far too long to sit on a paper.
If I think I have 20 days more to be reviewing it, then I will surely forget that I have a pending job. So I try to do it in a week time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you made a very interesting point. Forgive me if I'm, because I was doing some other work whilst you were talking, so I may have missed something you said about Indian authors or authors from the subcontinent not getting, or even from other parts of the world, say submitting to the British journal or the European journal, not being accepted in a fair way. I think I get papers occasionally from parts of the world where resources are short, where it's difficult for people to work. They've worked very hard in difficult circumstances to produce what is essentially a good paper, but may have many faults. And I think, you know, irrespective whether it's India or Nigeria or wherever, they need a little bit of help moving them through the process. So there should be no bias at all to people from around the world, say coming to the British journal or the European journal or whatever. There should be no bias. And I don't think authors should feel that there is any bias. And if there is, then there's something wrong with the reviewers.
I think what happens is when you're sending your article for an international journal, the readability has to be global. So if you are very focused and the literature you are submitting is localized for use in your own country and the methodology is adopted only in your country, it's like 3D printing and 3D measures to plan. If you're not doing that and worldwide is doing that, and if you send conventional done traditional methods used article in a British journal or an American journal, the readers there would not want to read it. So the authors, the reviewers there have to see what is global trend. So if that fits in, if your article fits in their trend, it is more acceptable. But if you're doing your job with the very old methods which are not being used now, there are chances that your article is rejected unless until you can prove that it is the forgotten art, like a linguist split. It is a forgotten art. It's not being done anywhere except only in our country, in our center. And if we write, then I think it is good.
Quite right.
Yeah.
I think that's entirely right, that it needs to be country appropriate. But nevertheless, you can make things to some extent country appropriate and still publish in another journal from another continent. And I feel, as a reviewer, and I review many papers, one of the joys of pseudo retirement is that I review many papers, including your own esteemed one. And I think it's actually important to try and help authors who are less advantaged in less advantaged countries to coming to production.
Yeah. Thank you.
one more question.
Yes.
Actually, people want to know which plagiarism check software can be used by authors.
As Elsevier provides us the authenticate. So our institution also has that. So if your institution has authenticated, it's best to be used. Rest of the free available softwares show some value, and when that article comes into authenticate, it gives a very high plagiarism value. So I think if anybody wants to use and check the article, it should be authenticate which should be used, although it's not free.
Thank you, ma'am. Somebody has asked, there is limitations for image numbers in journals. Sometimes it is seen that single figure has split 4-5 images. Example 1A, B, C, D. So is it considered as 1 or as 4? So how many can we send or accept?
So if, like British Journal says, suppose there are 2 articles, 2 figures you can submit. And if they are mentioning that it could be a collage, then it's fine. You can send it as a collage and put it as figure 1. So you don't have to send it as 1A, 1B, 1C, 1D. You make a 1 image with 4 images in that. That is one way. But sometimes even the journal say it cannot be a collage. It has to be independent 1 figure. Then you can't have many figures. So it depends upon the journal you are sending and what are the guide to author suggestions.
I think there are no more questions.
Okay, we can go ahead with the article then. We have received many review comments from the article, and instead of going through individual review comment, I think we could give you a format where we have. So this article was an open review sort of article, and the reviews were also published along with the article. That's why we chose this article, so that everything is published. We can discuss in detail about those. So if I can share with you all the review comments. I hope everybody has gone through the article at least. And if you can see my screen.
Ma'am. Yes, now we can see.
So this is the article comments I have.
You make it full screen, ma'am.
Yes, I am doing that.
Yes, ma'am.
Can you see it?
Yes, ma'am. Now see.
Okay. So if I can read it for you, this is recommendation is revision. This is a cross-sectional study aims to investigate how widely the surgical safety checklist is used by frontline medical professionals across the globe and identify potential barriers to implementation utilizing social networks. So this is the entire article, what is happening in this article. Overall, this is an interesting study demonstrating wide but variable use of the WHO surgical safety checklist. This presents a need to improve education in undergraduate and postgraduate training programs, especially in the low and middle income countries. So its application. So a summary, its application, whether it's interesting, whether it's filling a gap. So I enjoyed reading the paper. It was well written and current. I enjoyed the innovative methodology of use of social media. I have a few points. In introduction, broad overview of the surgical safety checklist is given, highlights that there has not been a study of this nature previously. Introduction is well written and concise. Good number of references are included. The author clearly demonstrated the background of surgical safety checklist. However, it would be better if they could include that checklist involved. So everything, I think people also looked for the surgical safety checklist and they put it on the group as well. So had it been included in the article, it would have been better. So the surgical safety checklist should be there with the article. If not in the article because of the restriction on the numbers, it could be added as a supplementary checklist. So supplementary data. To improve the understanding of the readers, it could be given as a supplementary material. Then the checklist guidelines, the Strobe guidelines have to be discussed. The hypothesis is not stated in this article. The aims of the study is clear. Then methodology, although in the article now you don't see these timelines, because in the review comments it was suggested that it should not be mentioned, so they have removed it. But the original review comments say that between 8 to 18 Greenwich Mean Time during March 13 this study was done. So it was not done 24/7, it was done from 8 till 6 in the evening. I'm unsure what point this is trying to make. Why have you mentioned this? Because if it was a global, it could have been different areas could have different timing. So why are responses limited to this time frame? It is not clear whether the survey was done for only one day or for a month. So that's why now they have said that it was done for a month. So it was not clear initially. Also, why from 8 to 6 p.m.? People often use their during the night. So maybe people could have, you could have more people as participants if you had it for 24/7. The author collected data from the globe. Then why do not allow 24 hours for inclusion? So that was a review comment from the reviewers. Then there was no participation consent. There's no mention about the participation consent, where the participants consented for their inclusion or not, and was any ethical approval obtained from the university where they did this study. So this is not mentioned. Was the questionnaire used validated? So this questionnaire, whichever they used, was it used earlier and validated, or if it was a new, would they want to comment on its validity? So this is, again, I'll be sharing you. And another comment which is important is that multiple submissions from the same internet protocol address were blocked. In the methodology section, they would have written, surely this prevents people working in the same hospital or in the same family household. They could not have made their entries. So this again limits. So this has to be taken care of. So this was the suggestion. Then again, in the original article, they had mentioned that there were professionals who filled up, but it was not clear whether it was doctors, it was nurses, it was the practitioners. So now in the content, they have said it was medical students. So that is how they have improved, and it has become more clear. One organization, schoolofsurgery.org, was used, and it would be helpful if the author could describe how popular or well known this organization is, how many followers does it have, what are the main targets. So if you're using some anything, then it has to be detailed. Small 2-3 lines about that should be included in the content or in the methodology section, wherever you are mentioning it. Has the author investigated whether participants never use? This is very important. Or never heard of SCC. If not, why? So they have asked, in their 4 questions, they have asked whether you know about the surgical safety checklist, but they have not asked anybody never ever used. So this is also important, and they should know, they should have asked. But because they have already done this study and they could now not include this, so this suggestion could not be further taken up. Then again, in the results section, this many people were responses were there from low and middle income countries, and in the abstract there was some other figure, so they have to cross check that the figures are same. 65 countries, top 5 countries. If you're giving so many countries, the best 5 countries or top 5 countries should be stated. Use of graph. So clustered bar graph is recommended. So they have asked them to change the presentation style. So similarly, in discussion, responses from non-medical professionals have been excluded from the analysis. How were you able to determine who was not a medical professional? So just to get a better picture, this question has been suggested. Good and clear discussion about the limitation of the study. So article has described that very well. It would be better if author could also state that people who finish the surgery are likely to have a positive experience or interest with the surgical safety checklist. And how are those evidence helping it? So again, on the table 2, and now you see the reference. I found no reference to the similar paper published in the BMJ Open on the same topic in 2013. So the reviewer says In 2013 also there was a similar topic. It would be good to see a comment and reference to this paper as it has clear similarities to your paper. Is there a reason for its submission? So if you are writing this paper in 2014 or 15, so and you are not included a particular similar paper, so the reviewer wants to know, is there a particular reason for its omission? And he has also mentioned this article. So this is how a 2-page recommendation for revision has been there for this article. I hope you can now relate this recommendation with your review letter and improve upon your writing style.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Someone has put up a comment. Consent and ethics, they have said, is not required.
If they have mentioned it in the article, and maybe they got a waiver from their university that you don't need and consent, I don't know. If it is an article where the human population is being included, I believe there should be a consent and the ethical approval as well. Mr. Marcus, what would you say on this?
I'm not sure that sort of study would need ethical approval. And by participating in the study, you're implying consent. And consent anyway is, and ethics are governed by ethics committees, research ethics committees, or according to Helsinki, etc. And I don't think that would require an ethical approval.
Okay.
That's mainly for the protection of patients.
Okay.
There's a question. For online service, how is consent and ethical clearance validated?
When you are doing any online question, you can have the consent included in your questionnaire. So first part of it could have your consent, and then you can have your questionnaire. So everyone who has entered the response in the questionnaire has already taken care of the consent. So once he has consented, then only he can go with the responses.
Participation implies consent.
Is ethical approval necessary for survey studies and retrospective studies?
In our institute, any study we do has to be approved ethically from the IRB. I don't know about others.
Then, Mark, what about the authenticity of using social media, ma'am? Is it validated?
Social media can be used. It's being used. It is a methodology. So you are not, whatever methodology you want to use, if you are using social media, you may use it.
So long as you state clearly where your information has come from.
Yeah, how and where you're going to do it, that has to be included in the methodology, but you can use it.
I think he's asking, has it to be validated?
Your questionnaire has to be validated.
Okay. And then somebody has made an observation and comment that the table 1 gender percentage of female participants is missing.
Yeah, so that could be a suggestion that it would be good to know what is the among the participants, how many were male and female. That can be suggested to the author. As a reviewer, you can do that.
How to check? How to check that the test in a study stated as gold standard relevant or not?
Knowledge.
Yeah.
Knowledge and experience.
Yes.
Of the reviewer.
You can, if you are expert in that field, you would know what is the gold standard in that particular area.
And the reviewers are usually in areas of their own expertise.
And then Dr. Divya Sharma is asking, online surveys may be fake as participants in a group discuss with each other and give answers. It's suspicious.
That is a limitation. That is a limitation. You can't say everything is fake, but that is the weakness of that platform. You can bring it to your discussion section that this can happen and how did you take care of that. Then you can go ahead with the IP addresses. So they are, if there are limitations, there are ways to address them as well. So if the same IP address is being used for different people and with similar result, that means they have discussed it. So that would again be a part of your methodology. How did you manage those issues?
If the study is a novel one, how do we know results and discussion is correct? Since there is no reference published to look up for reviewing.
As in general, I would think whatever the author is saying is authentic and is correct. Now I have to apply my mind. If I do it, would I expect such a scenario? And if it's yes, then okay. That's how I can think of. If it is a novel area, suppose I have designed a distractor and I am going to use it, and the other person may have not, or suppose you have done something latest designing of some instrument and it comes to me for review, and then I would think whatever you have suggested is what I believe would happen, and if the article also suggests the same, it's fine. If otherwise, I'll say I'm not an expert, I don't know about this. Maybe a third person may be required to review this because I can't imagine the scenario. Mr. Marcus, what would be your say on this?
I think it's very difficult. I agree with. I don't think there's anything else I can say. It is difficult, and it's something that we have to address in this increasing age of social media. Some people in the world abuse it, as we know. And studies, novels, some people think they're novel, perhaps they're not. I don't know, it's very difficult. There's so many things one has to, it sounds awful, to be suspicious of.
There is a question from Dr. Amira. What is the checklist for reporting in vitro studies? I'll have to look for it. I don't know. I saw this in the WhatsApp group as well. I'll have to look for it and then answer you.
There is one more question. How should we consider the importance of age of the manuscript or research? How many years of delay can be considered good for accepting the manuscript?
So if you have done a study and you're sleeping on it, then after 6 years you wake up and you want to do, much would have been progressed in that direction. And you go through the literature again and see, do you think your results are still filling some knowledge gap? If they are filling some knowledge gap, then it may be good to publish it now as well. But if you feel that knowledge gap has already been addressed, then there's no point of that publication coming up now. That's what I think.
Quite right.
I think, ma'am, we have finished with the questions.
Okay.
I am putting up the feedback for today's sessions. I would request everyone to fill this, please.
Ankita, can you also share the both the things, the recommendation as well as the checklist?
Yes, ma'am. I would do that. We'll do that in the group also.
I don't know if all of them are there in the group as well. So share it here as well and in the group as well.
Okay, ma'am. Just I need a minute. Yeah, I'll do that. We'll be sharing both the things. What happens to the reviewers' comment regarding the previous publication and the comments?
Didn't get. I didn't get.
What happens to the reviewer's comment regarding the previous publication? And
Okay, Divya, this is Dr. Mehra here.
Yes, please. Hi.
Hi, how are you? And Ankita, how are you? So this was me here. You had mentioned in the review thing that the comments were there of the reviewer regarding him coming across a similar publication by the authors.
Okay, this was an open review publication. So we took it because along with the article, there were reviewer comments as well. Published.
Okay, so can a study be done like this, where the author has already published the work in a different journal and done a salami? This is a salami type of thing, isn't it? Very
It's not a salami publication. It's the original report of an author, and it is published along with the reviewer's comment. So there is a different DOI for the article. There is a different DOI for the reviewer. Reviewer 1, reviewer 2, and reviewer 3. What I have done, I've clubbed all 3 review comments and given you a concise picture.
okay. Thank you.
ma'am, shall we share this checklist and everything in the mail? It's taking a little time.
Okay, we'll do that.
We'll share it in the mail as well as the group. I think then we'll cover all.
Okay.
I think we should call it a day.
Yeah, thank
There
you.
are no more
Again, we have crossed the time limit, huh? Again.
There's the
Feedback
last
for today. Feedback
there's the
for
last
today.
question as well.
Okay.
DOI is same. DOI is the moment I try to read the question, there are
Dr. Divya, can you listen?
Yes.
I want a question to discuss rather, not asking actually. The researchers who are not very good at statistical analysis, but they get a paper to review with lot of statistics. So mainly these are the epidemiological or those studies. So we are not able, we can have a eye on the scientific content, but not on the, so we should be fair enough to write that we haven't checked the statistical part, isn't
Yes.
it?
Yes.
So,
Yes, you
because
can write
reviewers
to the
also have
editor.
some limitation on themselves.
Yes, you can write to the editor that
Yes.
it is suggested to get the stats checked by a statistician. Rest
Okay.
scientific content has been reviewed by the reviewer.
And another one more thing, I always have a confusion because many times I get a comment that how the statistical part has been taken care, because mostly I do not go for the epidemiological studies, which have a more, because I am very poor, so I cannot handle it. So mainly it's a image analysis like SEM or the AFM or the yeah, OCT, like so these have a very limited samples are allowed to do. So these should have actually have a very less number of samples, because they are very hi-fi instruments and their capability to inspect all this, to image all these things have a limitation. So laser bulb and the lab heads do not allow it. And also because they are so high, they have a very good enhanced what is magnification. So I don't think they are very particular for their findings and there is no confusion in it. So I think they should be allowed to have a limitation in the samples. But I almost get a comment, and that is very disheartening also, because
in that scenario, whatever sample size, see, whenever you're doing any study, the sample size has to be calculated beforehand. So whatever sample
Yes.
size you have calculated, that has to be mentioned in the protocol as well. And why you are acting on that sample size. If that justification is there, you won't get a rejection. If that justification is missing, why you took up that particular sample size, then it will be an issue.
Yeah. Okay, I understand. Yes. Thank you.
Ankita?
Shall we close the session?
Yes,
I
yes,
was
please.
muted. Shall we close
Yeah.
the
Yes.
we close
We
the
meet,
session
we
then?
meet, we
The
meet
meeting
tomorrow again. Yeah.
Thank you
Thank you.
so much. Thanks to all the participants and the presenters. Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you, ma'am.